two powerful nations, thousands of miles apart. Yet for decades their rivalry has shaped wars, oil prices, and global politics. The United States and Iran were not always enemies. In fact, there was a time when they were close allies. But today their relationship is defined by sanctions, military threats, and regional conflict. To understand why tensions escalated, we have to go back more than 70 years, to a moment when politics, oil, and power began to collide. In 1953, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, made a decision that shocked Western governments. He nationalized Iran's oil industry, which had been dominated by foreign companies. Concerned about losing strategic oil access, the United States and Britain supported a covert operation that removed Mossadegh from power. The Shah of Iran, who supported Western interests, was restored to authority. For many Iranians, this moment became the first major source of distrust toward Washington. In 1979, massive protests erupted across Iran. The monarchy collapsed, and a new Islamic government took power under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The revolution fundamentally changed Iran's political direction. The new leadership strongly opposed Western influence and criticized the United States for supporting the previous regime. This shift transformed the relationship between the two countries almost overnight. Later that same year, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats hostage. The crisis lasted 444 days and dominated international headlines. Diplomatic relations between the United States and Iran were cut off. For Americans, the event symbolized a direct challenge to their country. For Iran's revolutionary government, it represented resistance against foreign influence. The damage to trust between the two nations was profound and long-lasting. In the decades that followed, tensions continued to grow. Iran expanded its influence across the Middle East through alliances and political support for groups in countries like Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. Meanwhile, the United States strengthened military partnerships with regional rivals of Iran. Each side viewed the other as a strategic threat. What began as political disagreement gradually evolved into a broader geopolitical rivalry. Another major point of conflict involved Iran's nuclear program. Iran insisted that its nuclear activities were intended for civilian energy and scientific research. However, the United States and several allied countries worried that the technology could eventually lead to nuclear weapons. The possibility of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East raised international concern and intensified diplomatic pressure. In 2015, years of negotiations resulted in a major international agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The deal limited Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. For a brief moment, relations between Iran and Western countries appeared to stabilize. Experts believed the agreement could delay Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for many years. But in 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement and reimposed heavy economic sanctions on Iran. The decision dramatically increased tensions again. Iran responded by gradually expanding parts of its nuclear program, and diplomatic efforts struggled to recover. The fragile balance that once existed between negotiation and confrontation began to break down. Beyond nuclear concerns, the United States and Iran also compete for influence across the Middle East. Iran supports allied groups and political movements in several countries, while the United States maintains military partnerships with regional governments and Israel. This competition has created a series of indirect conflicts, sometimes described as proxy wars, situations where rival powers support opposing sides in regional disputes. Over the past few years, tensions escalated further as military operations and strategic strikes targeted key infrastructure and military positions. In some cases, airstrikes were aimed at weakening Iran's nuclear program or military capabilities. These actions triggered retaliation and increased fears of a wider regional war. Another critical factor is geography. The Strait of Hormuz, located between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, is one of the most important shipping routes for global oil. Nearly a fifth of the world's energy supply passes through this narrow waterway. Any conflict in this region can immediately affect international markets and energy prices, making the rivalry between the United States and Iran a global concern. Because both nations play significant roles in global politics, their tensions rarely remain local. Military actions, economic sanctions, and political disputes can impact energy markets, international alliances, and regional stability. Even limited confrontations have the potential to reshape global economic conditions. The rivalry between the United States and Iran did not begin with a single event. It developed over decades through revolutions, political decisions, strategic alliances, and competing visions of regional power. Understanding this history helps explain why tensions remain so persistent, and why the world continues to watch closely whenever relations between these two nations move closer to conflict.